Theresa May and her senior ministers are going to kickstart the Brexit process again, this time by setting out a framework for Britain's future relationship with the EU in a series of speeches. But where should the so-called road to Brexit head? To discuss that, I'm joined by the former Deputy Director of Britain Stronger in Europe, Lucy Thomas. She's joined here by the co-chair of Leave Means Leave, Richard Tice. Welcome to you both. This is another relaunch. We're told it's to unite the country behind the idea of Brexit. Do you think Boris Johnson can do that on St Valentine's Day?
Well, what's extraordinary is that we're having this discussion at all because it's a year ago that the Prime Minister gave her excellent Lancaster House speech when she said we were leaving the single market and leaving the customs union, quite rightly, so we can maximise the benefits. It's a sign of the drift...
Stupidity of the British public?
Well, no, that's what leadership's about. It's the sign of the drift that's happened in the process and the fact that civil servants have really taken over the negotiating process, that we are where we are. Bear in mind, of course, that last summer, both major parties said in their manifestos, we're going to leave the single market and the customs union. Yet somehow it's crept back into the debate, and it shouldn't have.
So you see this process, these series of speeches about ramming home to the British public, we're leaving the single market, we're leaving the customs union. Because
it clearly needs saying again, because it was, the Prime Minister said it last January, it was put in both manifestos last summer, and yet still that some of the Westminster elite are trying to cast doubt on it and prevent it.
Is that what we need?
Well, I think Richard just characterised the sort of oversimplification of we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and actually the practicalities that underlie each of those things are enormous. So look at the Japanese car makers who stood outside number 10 last week saying, fine, if you want to increase friction within our trading process, we will leave. It's straightforward, and so you can say we're leaving the single market, leaving customs union, whatever else, but then what is your alternative? And actually, if you look at the Lancaster House speech a year ago, there was no sort of certainty, there was no declaration about what will happen in terms of customs. Theresa May said she was very open to what kind of partnership agreement or association agreement. So I'm afraid, Richard, this is simply the working through of the practicalities of what it really means.
And as I said earlier, because the civil servants are not doing it that well, we are where we are. The reality is, for example, we at Leave Means Leave, we had a meeting with Michel Barnier 3 weeks ago. There is a deal on the table that we recommend. It's the Canada-style deal, where you basically get tariff-free on all goods. That could be agreed by July, it could be documented by the autumn. Everybody knows where they stand. What's happened is, the Prime Minister quite rightly asked for a deep and special relationship and deal. It's pretty clear that actually many in the EU are not prepared to give that. So we've got to accept where we are, move on and create some certainty. And if you went the Canada-style deal route, you don't even need a transition period.
Well, I mean, if it were that straightforward, would it not have already happened? I mean, the problem is...
Yeah, the point is that the Prime Minister is still trying for a all-encompassing deal, and it's becoming ever clearer as weeks go by that that's not going to be possible.
But, I mean, the Prime Minister, it seems to me, the government has said, even if there is going to be a short-term negative impact on the British economy, that living up to not only what the British people decided in the referendum, but what the Prime Minister has said subsequently and emerged still Prime Minister after the general election, is that we're going to leave these bodies anyway, and that's the right thing to do.
Well, I think if people genuinely had all of the options put to them and the practical implications of that had been made clear, then sure.
Yeah, but we did have a general election, which Mrs May came first in.
Just about.
And has formed a government subsequently, and we had a referendum. And the economic stuff is arguable, isn't it? But the intent expressed in terms of both the manifestos and the referendum is clear.
Well, if you look at the Labour manifesto, they wanted to get all of the sort of the benefits, as good a deal as you have inside the EU. No, absolutely not. But I think to say their manifesto said we'll leave the single market and customs union is misrepresenting that.
No, it's not at all, because they talked about a new immigration set of rules. That means you have to have left the single market. And they talked about being able to negotiate free trade rules. That means you have to have left the customs union. Yes, it was cleverly couched in words, but the net result was crystal clear. What's disappointing is that the civil servants haven't got on with this process and taken us further down the road. And that's where probably Lucy and I agree we need to accelerate this process, so you've got much more clarity.
I mean, it's easy to knock civil servants, but what's the evidence that they haven't got on with the process? I mean, they've been attending these regular meetings, they've been departmental work going on, which the government has chosen not to publicise. I mean, it's not the civil service.
Well, there's evidence in the papers this morning.
It's not the civil service.
There's evidence this morning in the papers talking about the Home Office not being ready next March, even now.
Of course, there isn't an answer. They haven't managed to find an answer.
But that's the whole point. You've got to be preparing, and you've got to get your systems in place.
Are you expecting them to find the philosopher's stone on these questions?
No, I'm expecting them, a year after the Prime Minister's speech, to have started to make the appropriate preparations so that you're ready. And they clearly are either behind schedule or they just haven't.
I would argue they haven't actually had the direction from up above because, as I said before, they may have ruled out, we're leaving single market and customs union, but we hear that at last week's cabinet meeting where they were supposed to, make decisions, each time it's like tomorrow we'll make these big decisions. Apparently Theresa May opened the session saying, well, guys, we don't actually have to decide anything here today. There's supposed to be a crunch meeting this coming week at Chequers. It's the practicalities of how do you work out these incredibly complicated systems means that it's not the civil servants not getting on with it if you haven't got the agreement at the top.
Well,
there's nothing for them to get on with.
You need quality leadership at the top that's giving very clear directions, and then you need competent civil servants that are getting on with it because you know what the end time is. What's really worrying is if actually they are deliberately trying to sort of make it overcomplicated, over-difficult, in order to try and some way dilute it.
Where's the evidence that they're doing that? I mean, this is a negotiation or a discussion with the European Union.
The recent evidence, for example, was the leaked report out of the Treasury that was instigated apparently by the Cabinet Secretary without the authority of David Davis. I mean, that sort of thing.
Hang on, wait a minute. Do you not think? I mean, do you not think it is the job of the Treasury and government departments to try and prepare for the consequences of Brexit, which includes assessing what they think is the likely impact? I mean, surely you would do that in your business,
correct,
on any venture.
But I wouldn't expect, one of my team to do something without, on a major report like that, first of all, checking that's what you wanted doing, and secondly, you give it, first of all, to your senior director rather than leaking it to the press.
But this is due process. This is what you'd expect a government to do.
No, it's not due process.
There's no point in getting it.
It's not due process to leak a document, right, that you haven't even told the director of your department that you're preparing.
Actually, it wasn't leaked, was it? It was passed to MPs who chose to make it public. That's not exactly leaking.
Well, it's still not due process.
The government resisted telling MPs about it. When they did tell MPs about it, it then emerged from MPs, elected members of Parliament, what was in it. That's not the civil service doing malign leaking, is it?
Well, look, the civil servants in those departments are working for the Secretary of State in that department, and that's the due process. That's the line of the chain of command. That's the route it should go. You don't leak a document to MPs or give a document to MPs without giving it to your Secretary of State, who didn't even know the document existed.
This is the story. I was trying to get you to try and see whether Boris Johnson and then Liam Fox and the Prime Minister are all going to give speeches, could possibly come up with something which might unite the two of you. And the answer appears to be that that's not possible.
I think, well, first of all, my idea of a Valentine's gift is not a speech from Boris Johnson, unsurprisingly. I think if there is a genuine wish to unite everybody and bring people together, I think the first step for me would be to accept that people have different views, different opinions, but that any outcome should be based first and foremost on what is best for Britain and the economy, not based first and foremost on ideological red lines, and come what may, we will do X, Y and Z. And regardless of the economic consequences, because that's the thing that really upsets me, and that people like me and people who campaigned with me in the referendum, we're automatically dismissed because you're Ramonas and all the rest of it. Actually, for everybody concerned, I hope that we all want the best deal for the country. I'm going to try and see if I can get agreement. This is one of my regular correspondents just sent in a message saying we should crash out and take our money with us. The longer it goes on, the weaker we get. The civil service should be out. Now, whether or not you think it's the right thing, do you think that's the way we're heading, crashing out?
I think we are heading actually towards a Canada-style agreement, and I just wish that the Prime Minister would accept that and get on with it. What we can't do is be sitting here in October and then finally realise it.
I think because both sides want there to be a deal, I do hope and think that there will be a deal. What it ends up looking like is hard to see.
And just finally on this free trade Britain forging its way in the future, what is the logic of turning our back on our largest,
We're not turning our back on
largest bloc and our largest trading partner?
No, that's completely misrepresenting.
We are
the Prime Minister asked for a special relationship.
Free trade arrangements.
The Prime Minister asked for a special relationship and a new trade deal.
I'm just saying, I'm asking you as a representative of Leaving Leeds, why pull out of the biggest free trade bloc in the world, which also happens to be our biggest trading partner?
We're asking for a new trading arrangement, but we also want the ability to have our own trading arrangements.
My question is, why
I'm giving you the logical answer, which is what the people voted for. They voted for a much more open...
the people voted for it.
Well, yes, and that's what democracy, whether or not you like it here in Westminster, that's what democracy is all about.
You're an economic expert. Why do it?
Why do it? Because at the end of the day, 90% of global GDP growth over the next 10 to 20 years...
Growth.
Yes, absolutely.
That's not absolute trade.
You want to take advantage of the opportunities.
I know our biggest trading bloc at the moment is the European Union. And you as an economist, I'm not arguing about the rights and wrongs of it, but you as an economist are saying it is worthwhile pursuing growth in areas where we have little trade over maintaining the trade relationship which we have with the EU. As an economist.
You want to do both, and that's what the Prime Minister is asking for. That's what's being negotiated at the moment. My point is we need to make some very quick decisions so that we can get the best of both worlds, and that is likely to end up around the Canada-style option, where you get a free trade deal on goods only.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.